There is a trench of seawater in the Egyptian desert, 193 kilometers long, that you could swim across in 20 minutes. Through this trench in a normal year passes roughly 12% of all world trade, a third of the planet's container ships, and a meaningful slice of its oil and gas. When it works, it quietly collects billions in tolls, Egypt's golden goose. When it doesn't, and lately, it very much doesn't, the entire world economy feels it within weeks. Prices rise in Berlin, factories pause in Detroit, and ships add 10,000 kilometers sailing around Africa like it's the year 1850. If our Panama episode showed a canal running on rain, this is its bigger, older, more dangerous sibling. A ditch that emperors fought over, that trapped a fleet for 8 years, that one sideways ship turned into a global meme, and that is right now losing 60% of its income to missiles it cannot stop. This is the Suez Canal. Today on the Money Atlas, the canal that made globalization's map, and what happens when the world's most profitable shortcut becomes its most dangerous. Quick thing before we dig in. If you enjoy stories that make the world make sense, subscribing is the best way to see the next one, and it costs you nothing. All right, let's get into it. The value proposition is brutal geometry. Sail from Rotterdam to Singapore around Africa, the only option before 1869, and you'll cover roughly 24,000 kilometers, fighting the seas around the Cape of Good Hope, a graveyard of ships. Cut through Suez and the trip drops by nearly 9,000 kilometers, about 10 days saved per voyage per ship. Multiply 10 days by thousands of dollars an hour in fuel, crew, and charter costs, and by 20,000 transits a year, and you understand everything about this canal. It doesn't move cargo. It sells time, the one commodity every shipping company will pay almost anything for. And unlike Panama, there are no locks and no rain problem. Suez is sea level, a pure highway of salt water. The only complication has never been engineering. It's that everyone wants to own it. What actually rides through this trench? Southbound, Europe's exports machinery, chemicals, cars, grain heading for Asian ports. Northbound, the heavier flow, Asia's container armada before the current crisis, nearly a third of all the world's container traffic, plus Gulf oil and liquefied gas feeding Europe. When Europe's energy map broke in 2022 and Russian pipelines went quiet, Qatari LNG through Suez became a lifeline for European winters. In other words, the canal isn't carrying exotic cargo. It's carrying the ordinary contents of your home, your supermarket, and your power grid, which is exactly why, when it stops, you feel it in places that have never heard of port said. The canal opened in 1869, championed by a French diplomat, Ferdinand de Lesseps, the same man whose Panama attempt would later kill 20,000 and bankrupt France. You may remember him from episode 3. Suez was his triumph, and its price was paid mostly by Egyptians. A decade of digging, much of it forced labor under the corvée system, with worker deaths estimated in the tens of thousands. Europe celebrated with operas and imperial galas. Egypt got debt so crushing that within 6 years it had to sell its canal shares to Britain. And so the pattern was set on opening day. The canal sits in Egypt, but for its first 90 years, its profits and its politics belonged to someone else. That tension detonated in 1956, in one of the hinge moments of the 20th century. Egypt's new leader, Gamal Abdel Nasser, nationalized the canal to fund his dam on the Nile. Britain and France, the aging shareholders, invaded to take it back, with Israel alongside. And then something unprecedented happened. The United States said no. Washington, unwilling to see a colonial war ignite the Cold War, forced its own allies into humiliating retreat. Historians mark the Suez Crisis as the precise moment the British Empire's power audibly snapped. Think about that. A ditch in the desert didn't just carry trade. It carried the moment the world learned who was in charge now. And then the ditch demonstrated its dark side. When the Six-Day War erupted in 1967, Egypt blocked the canal, and it stayed blocked for 8 years. 14 cargo ships were trapped in the middle, stranded in the Great Bitter Lake, slowly turning yellow under desert sand. The Yellow Fleet. Their crews rotated for years, founding a floating micronation with its own stamps and Olympic Games. Meanwhile, world shipping adapted. This closure is what supercharged the giant supertanker, built to make the Africa route pay. The lesson every economist should tattoo somewhere. A choke point is leverage in peacetime and a hostage in war. Remember that, because it's about to happen again in this story. Fast forward to the modern canal, wider, deeper, and busier than ever. By 2023, it was handling 26,000 ships a year and collecting a record $10.3 billion in tolls, one of Egypt's top sources of foreign currency, alongside tourism and remittances. A single large container ship pays several $100,000, sometimes over $1 million, for one transit, and gladly, because the alternative costs more. Like Panama, like Singapore's port, this is the purest business in our atlas, geography as a subscription service. Egypt did nothing but exist in the right place, and the right place in a container world prints money, until, of course, it doesn't. How do you price a monopoly on geography? Egypt's Canal Authority employs, in effect, one elegant formula: charge almost as much as the alternative costs and not a cent more. A large container ship pays several $100,000 per transit, the biggest, over $1 million. Sounds outrageous until you price the Africa detour. 10 to 14 extra days of fuel at tens of thousands of dollars daily, crew, insurance, and the killer, a week of a $400 million asset earning nothing. Suez tolls are calibrated to leave shippers just enough savings to keep choosing the canal, while capturing nearly all the value the shortcut creates. It's the Panama playbook from episode 3. Don't price your cost, price their alternative. March 23, 2021. The Ever Given, a container ship longer than the Eiffel Tower is tall, gets caught by wind and wedges itself diagonally across the canal like a cork in a bottle. For 6 days, nothing moves. Behind it, a traffic jam of over 400 ships. Through it, nothing, roughly $10 billion of trade held hostage per day. The world watched a single tiny excavator scraping at the bow and made it a meme. Economists watched supply chains buckle from Hamburg to Ho Chi Minh City and didn't laugh. It took tugboats, dredgers, and a full moon's high tide to pop the cork. 6 days, one ship. The world's most efficient shortcut had revealed itself, once again, as its most fragile. Egypt, to be fair, keeps investing in its goose. In 2015, President Sisi ordered a second lane dug along part of the canal, $8 billion, completed in a single year, funded largely by ordinary Egyptians buying certificates, celebrated as the new Suez Canal. The promise: revenue would rocket to $13 billion by 2023. The reality: traffic grows with world trade, not with lane count. You can widen a doorway, but you can't make more world to walk through it. Revenue crept up, never rocketed. It was a useful upgrade wrapped in megaproject marketing, our Neom episode's lesson in miniature. But Egypt's real problem wasn't capacity. It was about to sail up from the south. Understand what this money means on the Egyptian side of the ledger. Egypt imports most of its wheat, It's the world's largest wheat buyer and pays in dollars it must earn somewhere. Its big three earners: remittances from Egyptians abroad, tourism, and the canal. For a country of 110 million people wrestling with debt crises and repeated IMF programs, canal tolls aren't a bonus. They're structural income, pre-spent in every budget. That's why Cairo treats the waterway like a crown jewel and a hostage at once. When we say the canal's revenue collapsed, we're not describing a company's bad quarter. We're describing a fiscal wound in the world's most populous Arab nation, which brings us to the missiles. Starting in late 2023, Houthi forces in Yemen began attacking ships at the Red Sea's southern gate. Over 190 vessels targeted with drones and missiles, ships sunk, sailors killed. The world's shipping lines did the math instantly. No toll saving is worth a missile. They turned their fleets around Africa, 10 to 14 extra days, the 1850 route, back by popular demand. Suez transits fell by half. Container traffic through the canal collapsed by 90%. And Egypt's golden goose, $10.3 billion in 2023, laid just $4 billion in 2024. A 60% pay cut, imposed on a 100 million person country by a militia with weapons costing less than one ship's toll. The Yellow Fleet lesson, updated for the drone age. So here is the full, honest economics of Chokepoints. The thesis of half this series, sharpened. Owning one is the closest thing to free money geography offers. Panama's rain-fed locks, Singapore's strait, Egypt's trench. But the same concentration that creates the rent creates the risk. A choke point is a promise to the world that everything will flow, and the moment anyone can credibly break that promise, the world routes around you instantly, and your rent evaporates. Worse, every crisis teaches your customers that alternatives exist. Some Asia-Europe cargo now eyes Arctic routes, rail corridors, even a proposed Israeli land bridge. Geography gave Egypt the goose. Geography cannot make anyone feed it. So will the world finally build around Suez? The sketches multiply every crisis. An Arctic route over melting Siberia, real but seasonal, Russian-controlled and insurable only by the brave. An India-Middle East Europe corridor of ports and railways, announced with fanfare, complicated by every war in the region. An Israeli rail land bridge from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean, drawn on maps for decades. Here's the cold arithmetic that protects Egypt. A single big container ship carries the equivalent of hundreds of freight trains. Rails and roads cannot move oceans of boxes. Only water moves water-scale trade. Suez's monopoly isn't legal or political, it's hydraulic. Until someone digs a second sea-level trench between two seas, the world's alternatives remain what they've been since 1869. Slideware. 150 years on, the ditch in the desert has outlived the empire that funded it, the empire that seized it, and the world order that fought over it. It remains what it has always been, a masterpiece of geometry and a hostage to geography, the place where the world economy is at its most efficient and therefore at its most breakable. Egypt's task, like Panama's, is simply stated and never finished. Keep the promise flowing. If this changed how you see the map, do 3 quick things. Tap like so more people find the video. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And turn on notifications, because next time we investigate a very different kind of illusion. The country whose GDP is officially a lie. On paper, it's richer than America. In reality, the money belongs to Apple, Google, and an accounting trick with a leprechaun's name. Ireland, the economy that isn't there. All the sources are in the description. This has been the Money Atlas. See you in the next one.